Every year, thousands of mysteries are solved. A missing person is found. A decades-old crime is finally explained. A forgotten clue changes everything. But not every mystery ends that way. Some leave behind only questions. No confession. No definitive evidence. No answers. Investigators search for years, sometimes decades. Families continue waiting. Experts continue debating. And yet, the truth remains just out of reach. Tonight, we're looking at 5 of the world's most enduring mysteries, cases that have puzzled investigators, historians, and ordinary people for generations. Some are centuries old, others happened within our lifetime. All have one thing in common. Despite countless investigations, the complete truth has never been discovered. Our first mystery begins on a tiny island off the coast of Scotland. December 1900. The Flannan Isles, a small chain of rocky islands in the North Atlantic. Beautiful, remote, and unforgiving. At the western edge of the islands stood the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. Its purpose was simple: guide ships safely through dangerous waters, to keep the light burning. 3 lighthouse keepers lived there in rotating shifts. Isolation was part of the job. Storms could cut them off from the mainland for weeks. But the routine was well understood. Everything changed just before Christmas. On December 15th, a passing ship reported something unusual. The lighthouse was dark, no warning light, no signal. For sailors navigating the Atlantic, that was deeply concerning. Bad weather prevented anyone from reaching the island immediately. Several days passed. Finally, on December 26th, relief keeper Joseph Moore arrived by boat. As he stepped onto the island, something immediately felt wrong. No one was waiting at the landing dock. Normally, at least one keeper would be there to greet the supply boat. This time, there was only silence. Moore climbed the steep path toward the lighthouse. The main door was closed. Inside, everything appeared strangely ordinary. The lamps had been cleaned. The beds were made. A meal sat untouched. A clock had stopped. One chair was pulled away from the table. 2 sets of waterproof jackets were missing. One was still hanging inside. There was no sign of a struggle. No blood. No evidence of violence. Most importantly, there was no sign of the 3 men: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur. They had simply vanished. Search teams combed the island. They searched the cliffs, the shoreline, nearby caves. Nothing. No footprints, no bodies, no equipment. It was as though the keepers had disappeared into thin air. Investigators later discovered storm damage on the western side of the island. Railings had been twisted. Heavy equipment had been moved. Boxes weighing over a ton had been displaced. This suggested that enormous waves had crashed against the rocks. One official theory proposed that 2 men went outside during the storm. The third followed to help. All 3 were then swept into the sea by a massive rogue wave. It was a plausible explanation, but not everyone was convinced. Why would experienced lighthouse keepers leave the station unattended during dangerous weather? Why would one man reportedly leave without his waterproof jacket? And why did no bodies ever wash ashore? Over the decades, the disappearance inspired countless theories. Some blamed an unexpected rogue wave. Others suggested a tragic accident. Local folklore even spoke of supernatural forces, though no evidence has ever supported those stories. More than a century later, the most likely explanation remains an accident caused by extreme weather. Yet without physical evidence, no one can say with complete certainty what happened on that isolated island. The lighthouse still stands today, silent, watching over the same unforgiving waters. A reminder that sometimes nature keeps its secrets. And that wouldn't be the last mystery on our list, where the evidence simply disappeared. Our next mystery begins on a cold February night in the mountains of Northern California. February 24th, 1978. 5 friends left California State University in Chico after watching a college basketball game. Their names were Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Ted Waher, Gary Mathias, and Jackie Hewitt. They were excited. The next morning, they were scheduled to play in a basketball tournament, one they had been looking forward to for weeks. Friends and family expected them home that evening. They never arrived. The five men all had mild intellectual disabilities, or mental health conditions, but they lived largely independent lives. They held jobs, played basketball together, and were well known in their community. Nothing about that evening suggested it would be the last time they were seen together. When none of the men returned home, their families immediately became concerned. Police began searching. At first, investigators assumed the group had simply become lost. Then, 4 days later, they found something unexpected: Jack Madruga's car. A turquoise 1969 Mercury Montego. It had been abandoned, not near Chico, but high in the Plumas National Forest, more than 70 miles away, in the opposite direction from their homes. The discovery raised immediate questions. The car wasn't damaged. It wasn't stuck. There was enough fuel left to continue driving. Investigators even managed to start the engine without difficulty. Why had the five men abandoned a perfectly working car, in freezing temperatures, far from where they were supposed to be? Search teams combed the surrounding mountains. Snow covered much of the landscape. Temperatures dropped well below freezing at night. Weeks passed, with no sign of the missing men. Then, as winter turned to spring, the investigation took another heartbreaking turn. In June, motorcyclists discovered a Forest Service trailer deep in the mountains. Inside, they found the body of Ted Waher. The trailer contained food, blankets, heating equipment, enough emergency supplies to keep someone alive for months. Yet most of those supplies had barely been touched. Investigators concluded that Ted had survived inside the trailer for several weeks, possibly even months, before eventually dying. Why he hadn't used much of the available food or started the heating system has never been fully explained. Nearby, searchers found the remains of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jackie Hewitt. Each had died from exposure to the harsh winter conditions. The fifth man, Gary Mathias, was nowhere to be found. Despite extensive searches, his body has never been recovered. To this day, he remains officially missing. The case became known as the Yuba County Five. Investigators considered numerous possibilities. Did the group become hopelessly lost? Were they fleeing from something or someone? Why had they driven so far off their intended route? Why abandon a working vehicle? And perhaps the most puzzling question of all, why were life-saving supplies inside the trailer left almost untouched? Nearly 50 years later, those questions remain unanswered. The mountains have never revealed what truly happened to the Yuba County Five. And with every passing year, the chances of finding Gary Mathias grow smaller. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't about what we know. They're about what we can never explain. Our third mystery takes us to a quiet valley in Norway. November 29th, 1970. A father and his two young daughters were hiking through the Isdal Valley, just outside the city of Bergen. The area was known for its rugged cliffs, dense woodland, and peaceful walking trails. It was the last place anyone expected to uncover one of Europe's greatest unsolved mysteries. As they walked, they noticed something unusual. Lying among the rocks was the badly burned body of a woman. Police were called immediately. The investigation that followed would uncover a trail of false identities, coded notes, and unanswered questions that continue to puzzle investigators. More than 50 years later, the woman carried no identification. The labels had been carefully removed from her clothing. Even the labels inside her suitcase had been cut away. It appeared someone had gone to great lengths to prevent her from ever being identified. Nearby, Investigators recovered several unusual items: an umbrella, a wristwatch, rubber boots, a partially melted bottle, and traces of sleeping pills. Everything was carefully documented, but none of it explained who she was or why she had died there. As detectives expanded their investigation, they made another discovery. Several suitcases had been left at Bergen railway station. The luggage belonged to the unknown woman. Inside, they found expensive clothing, multiple wigs, different pairs of glasses, cosmetics, maps, and notebooks containing strange coded entries. There were no passports, no photographs, no documents revealing her real identity. Only clues that seemed to create even more questions. Police soon learned that the woman had traveled across Europe using multiple false names. Hotel records showed she had checked into different hotels throughout Norway. Each time, she used a different identity, different occupations, different addresses, different nationalities. Staff members later recalled that she often requested rooms overlooking entrances or exits. She appeared cautious, observant, almost as though she expected someone to be watching. The coded notebook attracted particular attention. Investigators eventually concluded that the entries appeared to correspond to dates, locations, and her movements between cities. But the codes revealed nothing about her real name or her purpose. Whoever she truly was, she had carefully erased almost every trace of her identity. As news of the case spread, speculation grew rapidly. Some believed she was involved in espionage during the Cold War. Others suggested organized crime, smuggling, or intelligence operations. The timing seemed to fit. Europe in the early 1970s remained a center of Cold War activity. Norway hosted sensitive military installations. Foreign intelligence agencies operated throughout the region. Yet despite decades of investigation, no evidence has ever conclusively linked the woman to any intelligence service. Those theories remain exactly that, theories. Modern forensic techniques have revealed new information over the years. Scientists have examined her remains, her teeth, her isotopes, and even her DNA. These studies have provided clues about where she may have spent parts of her childhood, but they have not answered the one question investigators have been asking since 1970. Who was the Isdal Woman? Sometimes, the greatest mystery isn't how someone died. It's how an entire life can disappear without a name. Our fourth mystery begins. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, a man was found lying on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. At first glance, it appeared he had simply fallen asleep. He was neatly dressed. His shoes were polished. There were no obvious signs of violence. But when police examined him, they discovered something extraordinary. The man carried no identification. Every label had been carefully removed from his clothing. His fingerprints matched no known records. And despite newspaper coverage across Australia, no one came forward to identify him. The mystery only deepened. Hidden inside a tiny pocket sewn into his trousers, investigators found a small rolled-up piece of paper. Printed on it were two Persian words, Tamam Shud. Translated into English, they mean, "It is finished." The paper had been torn from a rare copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Police searched the entire country before eventually locating the book from which the page had been removed. Inside, they discovered a series of mysterious coded letters. Despite decades of effort, the code has never been conclusively deciphered. Who wrote it? What did it mean? No one knows. For more than 70 years, the Somerton Man remained unidentified. Then, in 2022, researchers using modern DNA genealogy concluded that the man was most likely Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. The identification answered one question, but many others remain. How did he die? Who wrote the code? Why were the labels removed? And what did Tamam Shud really signify? Even today, the Somerton Man remains one of Australia's most enduring mysteries. Our final mystery begins with fire. Christmas Eve, 1945. Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder put their 10 children to bed, expecting nothing more than a quiet Christmas morning. Instead, their house caught fire during the night. The parents and 4 of the children escaped. 5 children did not. Firefighters searched the ashes, but something didn't make sense. Despite the intensity of the blaze, no human remains belonging to the 5 missing children were ever recovered. Not a single bone, not a single confirmed trace. In the years that followed, the Sodder family received reports from people across America. Some claimed they had seen the children alive. Others reported encounters with individuals who resembled them years later. One anonymous photograph even arrived decades afterward, showing a man who bore a striking resemblance to the eldest missing son. Written on the back was a short message claiming he was still alive. Its authenticity was never verified. Investigators never reached a definitive conclusion. Did the children perish in the fire? Or were they taken before the flames spread? Nearly 80 years later, the answer remains unknown. The Flannan Isles, the Yuba County Five, the Isdal Woman, the Somerton Man, the Sodder Children. Different countries, different decades, different circumstances, yet each mystery shares the same ending. Questions without answers. Technology continues to improve. DNA solves cases once thought impossible. Forgotten evidence is rediscovered. Witnesses come forward after decades of silence. Perhaps, one day, one of these mysteries will finally be solved. Until then, they remain reminders that even in a world filled with cameras, forensic science, and modern technology, some secrets still refuse to be uncovered. And perhaps that's exactly why they continue to fascinate us.